You ever think about how much stuff gets hyped up in society and life, and it fails to meet your expectations? It disappoints you fantastically. It could be a movie. It could be your sister. I don't know. Stuff disappoints you all the time. Not college football. Not yesterday. We're jam-packed. We're high atop a suntastic downtown Nashville, Tennessee. It is Sunday night, September 28th, the year of our Lord 2025. We were at USC, Illinois yesterday. We were at Alabama, Georgia last night. Two classics amongst many classics. I've got game reactions. I've got a lot to talk about. Sam Pittman has lost his job today, so we've got a coaching search underway. Hoops doesn't have one underway. They got to hire a new coach, and Bobby Petrino's hat is in the ring. Current, by the way, as of tonight, as of 7 p.m. Central Time on this Sunday night, September 28th, Bobby Petrino is the interim head coach of the Arkansas Razorbacks. Vroom, vroom. The AP poll is an utter disaster this week, which is an evergreen statement on this show on Sunday nights, but there's some special, I would say, egregiousness to this week's poll. We will discuss, but not to start the show. It doesn't deserve that kind of treatment. Officiating yesterday just flat out robbed Wake Forest, and we are a Wake Forest-friendly program. So I will, I don't know, for like the fourth or fifth time this year, point out what has to be pointed out. And no one else can do it, apparently, because of conference affiliation and media rights deals and all this stuff. Well, we don't have any, so we can talk about it. All that, plus I got a tour announcement tonight. We got Best Bets. The Ramen Noodle Express started 0-4 yesterday and just fought and clawed back to a 500 day. Now, you may think, 500, that doesn't win money. That's true, but it could have been much worse. So if we can go bad week 500s, then we know our good week's coming. We know we'll blow it up. Then we'll look back and say, I'm glad we were able to salvage 500 that week. We got a jam-packed show. Jam-packed show. I know a lot of people are here to listen to specific things tonight. We will not fail you. I don't know, unless Bradley screws it up. We'll see. They're watching us in Lancaster, PA, Miami, Florida, Leander, Texas, and Ringgold, Georgia. Follow the Instagram story. It was loaded yesterday at Josh Pate CFB. We were all over the place, man. Almost didn't get home last night, which is a story that I'll tell for another day. I'll save it for another day. Alabama 24, Georgia 21. Man, oh man, I just wish you guys could have been there. A lot of you were. Many more of you watched at home. Haven't seen the TV rating. I assume like 1 trillion people watched this. Brought to you by Quick Trip. We got down there courtesy of Quick Trip. I'm giving this game 4.5 Chalai on the 1 to 5 scale. That was the number one topic of conversation walking off the field last night. There were players, coaches, staffers, stadium workers even, who asked how many Chalai will this game get? Look at that scene. Who's got it better than us? In the history of human civilization, who has it better than us on a college football Saturday in the fall? I don't care if you're a Georgia fan or not. I don't care if you've ever been to Sanford Stadium. I would highly encourage you to take in a Saturday night high-level SEC game at Sanford Stadium. Those people have done big things with their in-game presentation, by the way, just before I get to the game itself. Because I was mildly to moderately critical of Georgia game day operations for a while. Not anymore. I've said this for a few years now. Man, they know what they're doing. They just, if you don't know, and you're maybe in that line of work, go to a Georgia game. They really, really know what they're doing there. And they also found a way to get the rain out of there. There was a rainbow over the field before the game. Again, just fairy tale college football stuff. So, the longest home winning streak in the country is snapped. Pre-COVID. That was the last time someone had come into Sanford Stadium and beaten Georgia. And it was William Muschamp, of all people, who I'm told was at the game last night. So we go into this game. We predicted it last week. You'll remember I used the phrase competitive character a lot about Alabama. I did it after the Florida State game, and I continued to do it even as they beat UL Monroe and they beat Wisconsin, because I didn't care about UL Monroe and Wisconsin. Not that those games didn't matter, but it wasn't going to prove anything was back about Alabama. It wasn't going to prove anything was definitively solved about problems Alabama had. The Georgia game was going to be that. So the Georgia game happened last night. I thought Alabama had a number of matchup advantages in this game, but going into it, I picked Georgia. I picked them because I thought the road would shake Alabama. because I've seen it do it several times. I thought their offensive line would be a mess last night because I've seen it happen before. I thought there'd be penalties all over the place because there were, or turnovers because there were in the Oklahoma game, Vandy game, FSU game this year. None of it. That's competitive character. I don't regret saying anything I said about Alabama. They just rectified it. So the first thing I want to tell you is Alabama felt a lot different last night. I'm around them a fair amount. So there is a reason you get paid a whole lot of money. Now, players get paid a lot of money these days as well, but coaches get paid a whole lot of money, and they always have. And this is where it shows up. Alabama's just different now. I don't know if they needed to taste their own blood. I don't know if they needed to have their competitive character called into question. Whatever it was, it worked. It worked. They just fundamentally feel different. Been around them a while. They feel different. They handled last night differently. They showed up in warm-ups, just felt different. Been around them long enough to know. Felt different. Obviously, if you watched the game, it looked different. They had one false start the whole night. The place was insane. I couldn't hear the people next to me talking to me. And they're not only one false start the whole night, operationally, they went in there like they were working in the indoor facility. The offense opened with 2 14-play drives, up 14-0. It's the classic, here we go again, which is eternal now. It's just evergreen for Georgia fans when they play Alabama. You don't believe in ghosts. You don't believe in goblins. You don't believe any of that stuff, but you believe in Alabama if you're a Georgia fan. It's got to be a nightmare because it doesn't even matter how good you've looked. When they're across the field from you, 53 1/3 yards away, there are those crimson helmets. Here we go again. And it happened again last night. 13 of 19 on third down. Let's just talk about this for a second. All the stuff that was vintage Alabama under Nick Saban. And in the early portions of the Kalen DeBoer tenure, as well as the latter portions of the Nick Saban tenure, had started to wane a little bit. Just re-sledgehammered you to the face last night. 13 of 19 on third down. That is the most third down conversions Georgia has allowed in 30 seasons. Home or away, I don't care. That's the most they've allowed in 30 seasons. DeBoer and Grubb just put on a clinic. And I got to tell you, I'm on the field for this game. It was a night game, so a lot of staffs, around the country had already had their games that day. Everyone's watching. These are some of the coaching matchups everyone in the coaching industry is fascinated by. They're interested in. They talk about it all week amongst themselves. I kid you not. During the game, I am getting text from other coaches, just random, across the country, talking about Ryan Grubb, just putting Kirby and his staff in a blender. Not in like a demeaning way or anything like that. I just mean not to whiteboard you, because I'm not about to do that because I'm not qualified for it, but just other coaches watching in real time and pointing out little nuances, little intricacies, little things here and there. Look at this bunch set. Look at this motion. Watch the check. Watch what Kirby's defense does. Look at their sideline. Look how crazy this drives them. And it was an all-night thing. So again, it's just the worst-case scenario if you're Georgia, because you had to deal with Saban for a long time, but the whole SEC had to deal with Saban for a long time. So once he's out of there, it can't get any worse. And then they bring in a guy who has terrorized Dan Lanning, who came from your coaching tree, and beaten him 3 times, I think it was. And then he comes in and is up 28-0 on you the first time he faces you last year. And then he goes immediately into your building and does the same thing again. And it's worst case scenario because what was supposed to be like a new era, post-Nick Saban at Alabama, is still giving you nightmares. So Alabama goes on the road and they do that, and they have one false start, which I thought was the most impressive part of the entire evening, and that's even with Ty Simpson's stat line that we're about to get to. They had fewer penalties than their opponent for the first time under Kalen DeBoer. How did Alabama look different, Josh? That's one way they look different. That's atypical so far for them under him. Now, the question becomes, what did we see last night? Well, we saw Alabama beat Georgia. That's a big deal. Did we see a turning of the page? Did we see the beginning of a new trend? Will you look back on the Georgia game 3.5 years from now and say, since the Georgia game, or maybe the better way to put it is, since the beginning of the Alabama-Georgia game, Alabama has done this, they've done that. It really felt like that to me, but I don't know, because only time can tell. They control that, but only time can tell on that. They had a 77-53 plays run, edge. They just tilted the game so quickly. Red zone. I would say, Jesse, along with that third down number being 13 of 19, I would say 4 of 4 for 24 points in the red zone, while Georgia was 2 of 3 for 14 points is a pretty big deal. I cannot, in strong enough terms, praise Ty Simpson on this show for two reasons. The first of which is he's hung around there forever. Dante Moore just crushed Penn State last night. Well, they didn't blow him out, but you know what I mean, just shined. And he's a transfer guy. That's great. Carson Beck looks really good at Miami. That's great. There is a special corner of my heart for guys who commit to a school, do not immediately win the job, and then they stick it out, and then they get better and better and better, and then their number's called. And they're probably not going to get 4 years to start or 3 years to start, but they make the most of the time they have. Well, that's Ty Simpson. And so then his season, and really his career as a starter, begins the way it did at Florida State. It's so easy to look back on this. It just rolls off the tongue. And then what happened? And then what happened? But in real time, those days and those hours and those minutes, there was no way to speed them up. And that had to be torturous for Kalen DeBoer. But hey, DeBoer can be at Alabama an infinite amount of years. You don't really get that as a player. You get a small window. And within that window, you get a few big moments. And Ty Simpson's first big moment, through no fault of his, in my opinion, crashed and burned. And so then what'd they do? Well, he played about as razor sharp as you could play, but it's against UL Monroe, it's against Wisconsin, so we'll see when he goes on the road. He probably, all things considered, played better than he played those previous two games against Georgia. And there's something to be said about guys who are field generals. You know, a stat line's one thing, but you've seen teams before where quarterback plays good, but it's not really the nucleus of the team. Probably not even looked at as a team leader. Normally when they're good, they are. In an ideal world, they are. But you never know that dynamic. If you're around Alabama, I think they showed a lot of really good pregame B-roll last night that showed you that's a field general. And then his play has to back it up. It doesn't matter how much you run your mouth if your play doesn't back it up, because things just go in one ear and out the other. Guys roll their eyes. Not when you win. Not when you put them in a position to win. When you put a receiver in position to win, when you put offensive linemen in the best position to win, when tailbacks know you under center gives them the best chance to win, all eyes are locked on you. You can talk as long as you want to. And that's where Ty Simpson finds himself now. He was 16 of 24 for 196 yards and 2 touchdowns just in the first half. And to be honest, if you told me Friday that was his game line, it wouldn't have really stood out to me all that much. I would have said, that sounds about right. That was his first half. Those first half touchdown drives, to me, more than the numbers themselves, watching him operate was amazing from field level. Because I know that they crank those mics up on TV. You can never appreciate how loud that place was field level unless you were standing on the field last night. And I've watched them as just an offensive operation get really shaken by that for several trips on the road now. And then there he is out there. All the reason in the world to be shaken. There they are as a team. All the reason in the world to be shaken. And on that first drive, it was so crazy to watch from field level. I swear to you, there are multiple plays on that 14-play drive. Choose which one, right? There are 2 of them right there to start the game. I think he checked in and out of like 2 different plays, and that clock's running down 10, 9, 8. It sounds like multiple jet engines on a tarmac at Hartsfield. You can't hear anything, and he did everything but yawn. It just looks like he's going through repetitions in the summer. So calm, so at ease, and ball snap with 2 seconds, 1 second to go, firmly in control, third down conversion, third down conversion, third down conversion. A lot of those throws are over the middle of the field. A lot of them are in traffic. Can't say enough good things about him. As many passing first downs as Georgia had total first downs. Can't say enough good things about him. Just a complete field general. Ryan Williams dropped that probable touchdown pass early. It's a thing he struggled with a little bit more. I'll tell you one thing that got overlooked a little bit that I think helps him a lot. I mean, he dropped that ball. He's wide open. He has blistered that defense. He's wide open, just drops it. You fast forward to the fourth quarter, and they throw him a ball up the right sideline, and he took what is the equivalent of a pretty serious car crash worth of a tackle and popped right back up. Ball never came out, and it's just moved the sticks, first down. From a mental standpoint, I look at stuff like that, and I say, dude, the normal person goes into a complete shell. Even if they had Ryan Williams' physical ability and they could get open and they were playing major college football in front of millions of people, already knowing they're talking a little bit about your inconsistencies catching the ball. If you drop that ball, you are done mentally. Well, he's not normal. Guys in that position aren't normal. And to just watch that fourth quarter, you fast forward a couple hours, fourth quarter, catch, bam. Most people are being carted off. Again, these are elite athletes. They're not most people. Just pops right back up. Move the sticks. First down. Don't even need to sub out. I think that's pretty important. Just tuck that play away. I think that's pretty important. So the Georgia side of all this, it can't be ignored. I never really like getting caught up in this whole Kirby Smart against Alabama thing, but you can't ignore it. He's got an Alabama problem. They got an Alabama problem. Part one of the Bama problem was the same one everyone had, and that was, man, they got Nick Saban. He's going to have the best roster in the country. And even if we recruit heads up with him, we'll never out-recruit him. So the best we can hope to do is compare rosters, maybe match rosters. But then they still got Nick Saban on game day. He'll still have a great staff. So that was always hard for obvious reasons. But Saban retired. You finally got one up on him. It took to a national championship game for you to do it, but you knocked that big domino down, and that's a huge domino. That was part one of the Bama problem. Then part two of the Bama problem is they bring a guy in that just gives you fits. Schematically, just gives you fits. And it's happened now a couple of times. And like I said, DeBoer's done it against Dan Lanning. They really had no clue how to handle him when he was at Washington and they were at Oregon. That's a very similar defensive scheme for obvious reasons. That's the tree Lanning came from. So it looks like that Alabama problem's not going anywhere until you do something about it, and I'm not really sure what you do about it because these aren't blowouts. All of these are close games, competitive games. You believe a touchdown catch that's dropped could be the difference here. Maybe if I had it to do over again, I don't go for it on 4th and 1. I kick the field goal, I tie the game. Who knows what happens? I'm just saying, remember when they won their second national title in a row? This was 23 or 22, whenever it was. I got in a knockdown drag out with Georgia fans innocently because I said to a fan who asked how many titles I thought Kirby would win, I said, I don't know. This may be it for him. It may be 2. Most guys never win 1. How do you know he's going to just go on to win more titles? Which I thought was a fair take. Their stance was, he's just won his second title in a row. And you think to yourself, all right, well, now there's just this long runway. We can't even see the end of the runway. He's going to be here for another 15 plus years. We're going to finish top 3 in recruiting every cycle. Saban's got to retire eventually, and sure enough, he did. What's going to stop us? The sport will stop you because it never stops adjusting to you. That's the price you pay for being on top. It never stopped for Saban. That was the price he paid for being on top. The difference is he never relinquished the top spot. Now, the game was changing. Saban didn't like the way it looked, so he got out because his legacy was secured. Kirby Smart's legacy will never be in doubt. The guy's won 2 national titles. He has built a total and complete monster at Georgia. So if he retired today, he's a legend, instant Hall of Famer. But my point then is the same as it is now. The sport never stops changing. There are consequences that successful people have. There are consequences successful programs have that failing programs never even know about. They think it's just first world, no problems. You're on the yacht. Who would ever cry on the yacht? Well, what you find is you find everyone's got the crosshairs on you when you're on top. And that's been Kirby in Georgia for a long time. And now it's pretty obvious watching them in the portal era, in the high-level NIL era. They don't have the kind of players Miami has. They don't have the kind of players a number of these programs have. Both of these programs here, by the way, play NIL sort of the same way. And I understand it because I would play it like Kirby does. I would look at it and I would say there is immense value for the next 40 years of your life if you commit to play football at the University of Georgia. You can't make every difference maker feel that way. And you watch them defensively. They don't have difference makers defensively. And a couple of them they brought in, Elomadozi, has been a non-factor so far. I don't know why that is, because I think they felt good about him. I felt really good about him. I thought they had hit a home run and gotten a kid from Army, and that was going to be one of the talking points of the season. It's just not there. They're in the 100s in pressure rate statistics. They still don't have a sack on the season. People accidentally sacked the quarterback over the span of multiple four-quarter games. In their case, a couple of them against very inferior opponents. So I'm saying all that to say his best rosters are behind him. You can say that about everybody because the elite teams are no longer going to stack talent like they used to, which just means you've got to be able to beat guys on game day. You've got to be able to beat other staffs on game day. And my fundamental mild concern for them when DeBoer got to Alabama is I felt Alabama made a hire keenly aware of the direction the sport was headed. By that I mean they understood Bama nor any other team in that league was ever going to have that insurmountable a talent edge on the rest of the league anymore. NIL was not going to allow it. The tops of the trees had been shaved off. You may still have an edge, but it will not be this unequivocal edge. So you better get a guy who can win games on game day. You better get a staff that can beat other staffs 10 times out of the year. And Alabama's got one, and they've put it on display against Georgia. I don't think I'm saying anything they don't realize there. The difference is I can say it consequence-free in a microphone. Kirby can't just snap his fingers in the middle of a season and do something about that. I think they will. They won't rest until they get it right there. They may never get it right. I don't know. But the days of just throwing that Georgia helmet out there and understanding that gets us 10.5 wins per season is gone. Still the best program in the country to me. I think the University of Georgia is the best football program in the country. But that stuff last night, that'll keep happening. As long as you can't affect the quarterback, that'll keep happening. And for all the talk about those difference makers they got at wide receiver, it may be that Gunnar Stockton's talent profile limits what they can do with those additions at receiver. So again, these are problems. These are nitpicking problems that you would never point out with a team that perennially goes 7-5 or 8-4. This is Georgia. They're supposed to compete for a national championship. So the one thing to remember is Bama got knocked down in week 1. So I was talking to someone last night, and I told them best thing to happen to Bama, as it turns out, is losing that game in week 1. They said, how could that possibly be? Who wants to lose a game? No one wants to lose a game. But if you're like me and you believe no one's going undefeated anymore, then you understand the losses have to come somewhere. So if the losses are inevitable, then the next question is, when are they going to happen and what are you going to learn from them? Alabama's loss could not have been put to better use. Alabama lost to Florida State, and it looks like it completely rewired everything about the team, and maybe in some cases, things about that head coach, and in many cases, things about the entire organization. Because, man, they walked into that building last night, and they carried themselves a whole lot different than Alabama at any point last year. It seemed kind of familiar in years gone by. Just the way they walked into a very hostile building and never blinked. In fact, they took the fight to the tenant as the visitor. So I've seen what it does to Alabama to lose a game. What's it going to do to Georgia to lose a game? Now they taste their own blood. They were going to lose. They weren't going to go undefeated. So they taste it now. Week 4? They taste it. We're headed into week 5, or are we headed into week 6? Whatever it is. Point being, I think that's one of the best staffs in the country at responding, because I think the program mentally is wired in such a way to respond. But it's not because they're magically going to discover this vaunted pass rush that they used to have. They don't have those players. So they're going to have to find wins on the margins. They're going to have to do a lot of stuff that's atypical to say that Georgia has to do. But that's college football now. That's it. It's watching Bama last night. Look at the way that defense plays. They failed to set the edge multiple times. I could run for 15 yards around the corner where Damani Jackson is. There's a lot of stuff that looks incomplete. You gash them here, you gash them there, busted coverage, wide open for a touchdown. You're not suffocating people anymore. This is just not happening. So you got to win on the margins. That's what you have to do. And you're going to have to get comfortable about 3 or 4 times a year. You're going to have a dogfight, fourth quarter, late decided game on your hands, whereas you used to be up 42-10. And that's just the way you got to do it. And if you're not comfortable with that, you may not be cut out for this. And that goes for coaches and that goes for players. So I'm excited. I've seen what Bama did with the loss. I'm excited to see what Georgia did with the loss. But man, oh man, I don't care who wins and loses. I care that as many of you as can possibly make it happen need to go down there and just watch a Saturday night game at Georgia. I cannot speak glowingly enough about the entire game day operation there. Unbelievable. The only thing that didn't go right for them last night is the outcome, because everything else was spot on. So full credit. You know, they have Quick Trip signage all over that place. I don't know if this is the case. I just off the top of my head think of Sanford Stadium as the only place that I see Quick Trip signage in the end zones and on the banners. So you can obviously tell I feel very comfortable there. And we appreciate Quick Trip for fueling us yesterday all the way from Champaign, Illinois to Athens, Georgia, back home to Nashville. When did we get home, Prez? Like 1:30? 1:30, 1:40, something like that. Yeah, it was a late night, but it was worthwhile. And, oh, you know what we have to do? Man, it just dawned on me, Jesse. I was about to skip right over this. Since it's Sunday night, I have to announce where we're headed this week. Now, there was a lot of controversy, I've been told, about where College Game Day announced that they were headed this week. College Game Day announced that they're headed to Tuscaloosa for Alabama against Vanderbilt, a matchup that I believe should be a top 10 matchup. Unfortunately, AP voters continue to be asleep at the wheel and have no earthly idea that Vanderbilt's even played games yet, so it's not going to be a top 20 matchup or top 10 matchup. It'll be a top 20. But I looked at that game, and truthfully, it would be easier for us to go to Alabama because it's a drive. But it wouldn't be right for us to go to Alabama. First off, because we saw them 24 hours ago. Secondly, because when I was a youth, when I was a college football youth, I mean a small youth, now this has been a while, Miami and Florida State was one of the best rivalries in sports. And it hasn't been for a long time. And I watched what happened Friday night in Charlottesville, Virginia, just like the rest of you did. All the more reason for us to take the Fall Don't Lie tour to Tallahassee, Florida this Saturday night when Miami comes to town. I haven't been to a game there in 10 years. They have completely overhauled that place. They've remodeled it. They've revamped it. The last big game they played there, they beat Alabama convincingly. There will be a lot of folks who forget everything they saw yesterday and swear Miami's about to go in there and roll. And I don't think that's going to be the case, obviously. And that's why I'm going to this game. So we will head to Florida State for the first time, I think, in 9 or 10 years. It was either 15 or 16. Deshaun Watson and Clemson went in there, beat them 35-31. I remember that. And I had a lot of fun. Then I got a ticket in Thomasville, Georgia that night for going like 39 and a 35. Thomasville is one of the most notorious speed traps in Georgia. Fortunately, we will not have to drive through there, courtesy of Quick Trip, but we're headed down there. Cannot wait. Everyone has to make their own decisions and go to the games they feel are best. That is the game that I feel is best to go to this week. Okay. I'm telling you, one of the underrated parts, probably the only price you pay aside from lack of sleep, which I don't care about, in the fall, going to 2 games in one day, is the voice suffers. Because you find that you have to yell to talk, especially in that place we were in last night. So, I'm not complaining. I just want you to feel sorry for me a little bit. Oh, boy. Jesse, earmuffs. Oregon 34, here you go, Bradley. Oregon 30, Penn State 24. This game recap generated by Flex Power, our friends at Flex Power. Oregon flexed powerfully. I give this game 4 Chali on the 1 to 5 scale. Double overtime game. Just offensively, just aesthetically, it's tough to watch Penn State's offense. I don't know that Penn State's going to be in many more Five Chali Classics as long as they're doing what they're doing there. There was talk for months. This is the beautiful thing about college football. We talk and talk and talk. Fortunately, that's allowed, or else I wouldn't have a job. But you talk about this stuff in January, but then you talk about it in March. And you know these things are coming months down the road. I mean, you and I, like if you're a Penn State fan, Oregon fan, college football fan, you probably talked about the Oregon-Penn State game 1,000 times over the course of the spring and summer. The beautiful thing is all that talk leads to you on the edge of your seat for 4 hours on a Saturday night in late September. It sounds like a country song. It's so awesome. I can't overstate. This also sounds like a country song. I can't overstate how devastating last night was for Penn State. We don't talk about the losers first on the show, but I just want you to know, if you tuned in to hear my take on Penn State's loss, buddy, you will get my take on Penn State's loss. Oregon is just better. The only thing I doubted was this early in the season and all the dynamics that were against them. Could they come across the country and win this game? And not only did they win it, I know it went to double overtime, but man, they controlled this game. Quarterback, they got the better one. Skill guys, they got the better ones. Staff, they got the better one. Line of scrimmage, they won. And I may have expected to say some of that after this game. I never really expected to say all of that. And there's no added context needed. It's not like the box score lies and there's some context. You know, hey, I know Oregon looks like they won this game, but here's the way it really happened. There's none of that. In fact, I'd say the box score lies the opposite way. I didn't even feel like the game was that close. Like there's some numbers Penn State ended up putting up, and they are still pretty paltry, as Meemaw would say, but I didn't even feel like they had that many rushing yards. Like where did Penn State find 139 rushing yards? I don't know. I have no idea. They held Penn State to 4 yards per carry in this game. And that was where Penn State had to flex. They weren't really going to flex throwing the ball. I didn't even think in a Penn State win they were going to truly flex 325 some odd yards through the air, anything like that. But, man, they just suffocated Penn State. It was tough to watch if you're a Penn State fan because you hoped in the back of your mind, you had held out hope. We played nobody so far. So, yeah, Oregon's coming to town and we respect them, but they got to deal with us too. They don't care. They dealt with you and they were fine. It's like taking your hand and putting it on the head of your much younger brother. And if you're good with balance, you can afford to take a sip of something and he's still over here just fighting. That's what it felt like. It's so discouraging to say from a Penn State perspective, but it is so encouraging because you know if you're an Oregon fan, this is the beginning for you. Not only is it's not quite the beginning of Dan Lanning's run, I'm just talking about this team. This team is so inexperienced. They're so new. They just got put together. It's not quite like they went Texas Tech mode or anything like that. I don't mean that. I just mean Dante Moore is your new starter. And you're supposed to have a dip, by the way. You lose Dylan Gabriel. Before that, you lost Bo Nix. There's supposed to be a dip here somewhere. And it feels like they keep increasing the level of quarterback play. And it's not supposed to happen that way, guys. In case you need evidence, look at Penn State. There's no guarantee that quarterback play just continues to elevate and elevate. But I'll tell you the other thing that I took away. Lanning took a lot of heat a couple of years ago. Specifically in the first Washington game they played on the road where he went for it on some fourth downs and everyone was critical of him. Some guys say they don't care about outside noise, and they're lying to you. Other guys, like Dan Lanning, say they don't care about outside noise, and I promise you, he's telling you the truth. He doesn't care about outside noise. He hears it, he just doesn't value it. And the way I know that is because after that little ordeal a couple of years ago, when everyone drug him over the coals for going for it on fourth down, even though every one of the critics had the benefit of hindsight on their side, which you don't get if you're coaching in game, they went for it on fourth down 7 times last night, and they got 5 of them. Just little old young Oregon traveling almost to Europe to play a game, basically. Just 5 of 7 on fourth down. Yeah, that's how you control a game. It's one way you control a game. This wasn't just one game. It's time we talk about Penn State for a second before I get back to Oregon. I am among the last to normally criticize James Franklin on the show, not because he never deserves criticism, because the criticism is always stupid to me. Because people can't ever just individually critique compartments. They always have to say James Franklin's trash, James Franklin's overrated, this and that, and that's always been dumb. So I never really do that. And normally I am perfectly willing and able to take a game for what it is on this show, and that is one game. This was not one game. And every Penn State fan knows it, and James Franklin knows it, and that entire staff and that athletic department knows it. A lot of the future of Penn State football, a lot of judgment about the trajectory of Penn State football was all predicated on this game. The thinking was, of course, we've got a bye week, we got home field here. They're pretty new, pretty young, pretty inexperienced. They got to fly cross country. They got to come in our building. We're off the bye. They're not. Also, we've built towards this team for multiple years. We got a third-year starter now at quarterback. We went and got the best defensive coordinator we could find in the Big Ten, and you got all that, and you just kind of get handled at home. Point being, it's the same kind of conversation they're having at Clemson. How would you ever expect it to get better, given the current set of circumstances? Coaching staff, the way they go about their business, the way the programs run. This is the apex. Okay, this collection of talent, this team, was the pinnacle. And if you're a Penn State fan, you were totally fine looking towards this year. Predicated on the fact that you win the Oregon game, and you got to get that one done, because the hurdles you have not been able to clear is, we don't win the big games, we can't win a national title. Well, you can't win a national title in September. You can lose one, but you can't win one in September. But the first hurdle was, all right, well, we got to win the Oregon game. Because if we got all those edges and we can't even win that game, there's no way we're going to Columbus in a couple of months and winning that game. And you didn't even get it done against Oregon. And I know the score looks close. I'm normally the one who says, dude, stop speaking, in such terms of totality. The game went to overtime. One play here or there, and it could have been the difference. It should have been emphatic. This should have been a moment in time for Penn State football. This should have been a moment of arrival for James Franklin and his tenure there. It should have been a very, very red letter day. And instead, it was kind of a black Saturday. Season's not over. They'll probably still make the playoff. But if you think in terms of ever having hope that Penn State was about to do more than Penn State has done, that's dead. It feels dead. Why would I have faith? Why would any Penn State fan have faith? See, this is the part where some of the criticism that you would normally write off as insane is totally valid. Totally valid. No one up there can say that you haven't gotten full buy-in from the student body, from the fan base. They had like 500,000 people there last night. Everyone's all in. Everyone's willing to bank on this year being the year. And it's just... it was close. That's about the best you can say. It was close again. Well, they've all been close, but they hadn't gotten pushed over the finish line. The portal additions at wide receiver we were so excited about, 6 receptions for 64 yards. And Devontae Ross was really most of that. And compare that to how many easy completions Will Stein got Dante Moore. This is what hurts. This is what hurts. Because Will Stein got like a brand new quarterback dropped in his lap every year, and he took his new quarterback across the country and just put on a clinic in front of you. And then you've had your guy in the building, and you're intimately familiar with him, and you know everything about him, and he's run your system multiple years. And it seemed like a struggle on par with watching Jimbo Fisher offenses at Texas A&M, where even when a first down pass is completed, it feels like a fight. It feels like the entire world is pushing against you, and it's such a sigh of relief just to watch a running back fall forward for 6.5 yards. Meanwhile, Will Stein is just up there playing video games against you in your own building. Dante Moore's launching a Heisman campaign against you in your own building, and your guy's 14 of 25, 137 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. It just should be so much better than that. There's no excuse for it not to be at Penn State. So this one's different. I'm not being hyperbolic because you guys who watch the show and listen to the show know I don't really do that. But I told you, and they knew it. I mean, I've been up there in that building the past couple of months. They knew how big this game was. I still had a little bit of hope. I picked Penn State to win the game. I had a little bit of hope in the back of my mind, maybe, just maybe. Some of the lessons I've learned in the history of this game apply here. And Penn State's looked very lethargic offensively so far, but maybe it is just a giant soda bottle that's been shaken up, and they're going to twist that cap against Oregon. It's flat. We opened it, and it turns out it's one of those commemorative Coke bottles from 1982, and it's flat. That's Penn State football. That's Penn State offense this year. There's just nothing there. Nothing more than we've seen before, maybe even less. I don't know how that's possible. I think last night's result began a new timeline for Penn State football, and I have no idea which one it is. Because it could be that it began a trajectory that ends with James Franklin not at Penn State anymore in like 3 years or something like that. And I'm not saying fired. I don't even know how it would happen. I'm speaking hypothetically. I'm just saying I could envision 3 years from now, Franklin's not there anymore, and the conversation is, this really began with that Oregon game a few years back. Nothing was ever the same after that. It could be that, but I'll tell you what else it could be. It could be that James Franklin looks himself in the mirror and says exactly what I just said. That was as good as it's going to get with my current way of doing things here. Last night was the end of James Franklin's Penn State 1.0. And tomorrow begins James Franklin Penn State 2.0. And there are only so many changes you can make during the season, but you never know if a loss like that, you never know how much he had invested into that particular game. So you never know how much that makes him look in the mirror and how much he commits to correcting 20 degrees here and shifting 5 degrees there and getting rid of this staffer and adding a new staffer and changing the way they do this and that. You never know if 3 years from now, you may be looking at James Franklin playing for a national championship and his quarterback and his offense are setting records, and you're saying this never happens if Oregon doesn't come in and really prove a point for us 3 years ago. I'm just saying one way or another, last night began a new timetable. It began a new timeline for Penn State football. Of that, I am very confident. So Penn State, I feel differently. Oregon, I feel differently. Because this is not their ceiling. As bad as that sucks for the rest of the Big Ten to hear, last night's not their ceiling. They don't know what it is yet. I don't know what it is yet. That quarterback, that offensive line, I mean, think about the moves they had to make on offensive line and then watching those guys work last night. Remember the Evan Stewart news? Remember how Oregon, boy, they lost their best receiver. What are they going to do? They're going to play and they're going to win because it is an organization. It's a program. More than a couple of individuals on a team. They're in ascension mode. I know that. So I don't know how much better that team can get, but I expect them to continue to get better. Let's move along. Jam-packed show, man. Just a jam-packed show. Let me take a sip of water, Bradley. You guys can check your phone for a second. Okay, we're back. Ole Miss beat LSU last night. Ole Miss 24, LSU 19. I would give it 3.5 chali on the 1 to 5 scale. This one got a little bit personal for me last week. So I'm going to talk about Ole Miss first, but I want to mention something about LSU. I got nothing but love for LSU. I love about 98% of the LSU fan base. About 2% of the LSU fan base are a bunch of clowns. And they ran their mouth a lot last week. And then they got worked pretty thoroughly yesterday. And the problems are very obvious. Very obvious. Lane Kiffin did you a favor because finally that portion of the LSU fan base that was just incapable of acknowledging obvious flaws until they lost a game, well, they finally lost a game yesterday. So now it's okay to talk about all the flaws. So anyway, I'll get to that in a second. Winners first. Ole Miss. I can't believe this game was even within reach in the fourth quarter. They pretty thoroughly outplayed and outcoached LSU. I know a lot of you, I think most of you probably watched this game because it was the mid-afternoon window. The bad luck stat in this one, which is the opposite of a padlock stat, the bad luck stat is Ole Miss had 14 penalties for 109 yards. Now, if you told me that on Friday, I would say, congrats, LSU. You're going to go in there and win a game. In reality, Ole Miss being so undisciplined is what kept LSU in the game. So it ended up, that's not a padlock stat. That's a bad luck stat. That would have fooled me on Friday if you told me that. Teams are revealing their identities right now. And with Ole Miss, no one forecasted this. I'm convinced 70+% of the Ole Miss fan base did not know anything about Trinidad Chambliss when this season started. They knew that Austin Simmons is the new face of this team, and Austin Simmons this, and Austin Simmons that. Hey, he's hurt. What are we going to do? Who's our backup? Trinidad. Didn't we travel there? Didn't mom and dad go there for their honeymoon? No. This is a player. Oh, but he's from D2. He's from FCS. I heard that a lot last week. FCS quarterback. An FCS quarterback is going to beat LSU. Well, Kiffin just went and got the player. He didn't import all of Ferris State to Oxford. So you didn't play an FCS team. You played a quarterback that was good enough to win a national championship in FCS. And there's this general ignorance, because most people don't watch FCS football, that there are no good players down there. There are no high caliber, like SEC, Big Ten caliber players. There are. The transfers happen every single year. This one just so happened to be at quarterback, and it wasn't for a starting role. It was to provide depth. But here's the problem. The problem is Kiffin can get pretty good production out of anyone, it seems. Trinidad Chambliss included. Not to disrespect him, because what I just said is hyperbolic. It's not really true. It just seems that way, which has got to be a gut punch. By the way, you know how bad Lane Kiffin makes the rest of the country look? You know how bad Penn State looks when they've had Drew Aller all these years, and Kiffin just goes and grabs a guy from Ferris State. Oh, my starter's hurt. I'll win with him. You know how bad that makes Clemson look when Cade Klubnik's been there all this time, and there was all this hoopla, as Meemaw would say a couple of cycles ago. We got Garrett Riley. We're going to pair him with Cade Klubnik. And Kiffin's like, I'll just go get a kid from FCS and not even plan on starting him. Oh, I've got to start him? All right, we'll win anyway. Yeah, it makes you look pretty bad. That also wears out the patience for a lot of offensive staffs elsewhere across the country. So Lane Kiffin gets a lot of folks in trouble. He's gotten himself in plenty of trouble over the years. By the way, I didn't mention it Sunday night. I cannot recommend that documentary strongly enough. ESPN did a really good job on that thing. I can't remember what the title is. Ryan McGee did a good job on it too. Friend of the program, Ryan McGee. The Many Lives of Lane Kiffin. Thank you, Jesse. He didn't say anything. I just remembered it. I would encourage you to go watch that. Anyway, that's what's happening at Ole Miss right now. The identity's forming. So there are a lot of people around Ole Miss who would tell you next year, oh, this team's going to do something next year. Why? Obviously, I'm saying that now that I know they beat LSU. I was very confident they would beat LSU. Let me tell you something else that was happening around the SEC last week. I'll share it because I already started to say it. There were a lot of people around the SEC very confident that Ole Miss would handle LSU. And it was because of a specific matchup. So, I just always want to be careful. You guys who watch the show long enough know I never burn anyone. I never burn sourcing or run my mouth about stuff I've been told to be quiet about. No one told me to be quiet about this. So let's just talk about it. LSU's got problems. These weren't revealed yesterday. LSU's had problems all season. Probably one of the worst things, in retrospect, that happened to them is they played Clemson in week 1. Well, why is that bad, Josh? We won the game. It's not bad. It's great that you won the game. You've got very, very serious flaws that it turns out are the same flaws Clemson has, and because you played each other week 1, only one of you could lose the game. And there's this thing that happens in college football where there are people who would be ultra critical of this thing in a loss that totally ignore that thing if you've won games. LSU has had flaws all season long. They cannot run the ball to save their lives. They haven't been able to all season. But because they hadn't lost a game yet, people bite your head off if you start mentioning it. So last week, I am telling you throughout the week, I'm getting lit up because we're talking about the LSU Ole Miss game. And I picked Ole Miss to win, and I was very confident it was one of my favorite games of the week because I thought there was a very glaring disadvantage that LSU had. Number one, they can't run the ball. Number two, your offensive staff is badly outmatched by their defensive staff. Well, that's not just me sitting here spitballing. That was one of the most popular talking points just around the league last week. I had other coaches hitting me up saying, hey, that LSU Ole Miss game, edge significantly. Ole Miss defensive staff against LSU. So, you just mentioned fractions of that. Oh, you're a hater. You're a hater. Boy, this used to be a great show. Now it's just clickbait. That's just, no, what it is telling the truth about your team that you refuse to see. This is to the 2%, not the 98% that I love, but the 2% of LSU clownery amongst the fan base. They don't want you mentioning that stuff. Well, we won games. Oh, and by the way, we're about to go into Oxford. You'll see when we put the pedal down, they're not as good last year. We had that game go the way it did last year, and now we're better and they're not as good. No, you're not. No, you just hadn't lost a game yet. Well, now you have lost a game. Now, guess what the LSU message boards look like today? A disaster. Because now everyone wants to call it out. It was already there. Who didn't see this? Who in the world was shocked? LSU couldn't run the ball yesterday. They can't run it against air. They can't run it against anyone. And what you have is you got someone like me who has extreme pro-LSU bias. I've always been upfront about this because LSU 2019 is the reason this show ever blew up. I'm very close to that program. I badly want LSU to win, but I won't lie for them and I won't lie about them. So I'm sitting here thinking to myself, you're telling me already in the Brian Kelly era, we've had a Heisman quarterback that gets wasted because we can't play defense, and then we get the defense figured out, and we're going to waste that because we can't run the ball at Louisiana State University. We can't run the ball. Of all the things that we could struggle with hypothetically, we couldn't get halfway decent DB play a couple of years ago. Now we can't run the ball. This is the state of Louisiana. They're right in your backyard. So talent acquisition, I actually think they've made moves to rectify. It's just that we're still in that position right now. So I think this team's got terminal flaws this year. And I mentioned that last couple of weeks. I tell you another thing. This model that we use, that everyone likes to anecdotally take shots at, it started dropping LSU 3 weeks ago. Just like it started dropping South Carolina before South Carolina started losing. Started dropping LSU. So the signs were already there. 2 of 11 on third down. And think about this. You want to know where lack of a ground game bites you? You want to know when you're putting a clearly less than 100% Garrett Nussmeier in an unfair position? Not only were they 2 of 11 on third down yesterday, their average distance to gain on third down was 8.1 yards. That's so pathetic and is never a situation you should be in. So I'm sitting here still saying the same things I've been saying about LSU, only now everyone will agree because they lost a football game. It was there already. One of the consistent tasks in this league, week to week, is to find consistency, just consistency in performance. When you can't run the ball, you will not have consistency in performance. Now, here's the difference. All right, so it was really, really interesting to watch Ole Miss and LSU and then watch Bama and Georgia. So Ole Miss beats LSU because LSU can't run the ball. LSU barely stayed in the game because they couldn't run the ball. Did you watch Bama against Georgia? Bama has not conventionally run the ball worth a crap all year. And yet their offense still functions. It still hums. Why is that? Because they got an excellent offensive coaching staff that understands if we're not going to conventionally run it like we did in 1938 right here between the tackles, we better be able to generate some version of it. We better be able to gain it in the aggregate of the way we run sweeps and we do motion this and motion that and we hit tailbacks out of the backfield really quick. Kublik described that brilliantly on this show last Thursday. You don't have that edge with your offensive staff. You just don't. It's not my job to sit here and break that down. I'm telling you, everyone's picked up on that. You had many cases yesterday where Ole Miss sat there and Pete Golding said, yeah, I'll just bring 3. I'll just play 3-man front. You still can't run it against us. And you know what? He's right, because you can't. And they won't be able to the rest of the year. No one's about to sell me, by the way, that when they get Caden Durham back, who was hurt, and that's not great, but they get him back and it'll be rectified. No, it won't. No, it will not be a strength for them at any point this year. Anyway, it just rubs me the wrong way because Me of all people being labeled an LSU hater boggled my mind last week. Boggled the mind. And a lot of the clowns, again, it's about 2%, not 98, that did that, are nowhere to be found on www.whatever.com today because we're dealing with the 2%. I understand that. I love 98% of you guys. So to you, I say we're in this together. To the rest of you, I say things I'm not willing to say on air, actually. Go to Academy. Do that. That's your punishment. Go to Academy, which is actually a reward. Academy Sports and Outdoors, longtime partner of the show. We love them for that. Academy Sports and Outdoors has many things that you need. We love them for that too. And I would encourage you, as I often do, before you just assume that you know what all's in there, make a trip. Yes, they've got sporting goods equipment. Yes, they're basketballs and hoops, footballs, cleats, gloves. Yeah, that's like 2% of the store. Look at the other 98%. You'll find stuff you never imagined was in Academy. Academy.com if you can't get there in person, and we appreciate them. Let's move on. What does this say? Here's the thing. A lot of people who claim they don't listen to the outside noise watch the show on Sunday nights. So there are some noteworthy individuals in the sport of college football who like to live text during the show. So if I glance over here, it's normally because I've been reading feedback in real time. Not that I would ever let that influence me. I don't care about the outside noise at Pate State. We would never let it affect us. It affects us. Sam Pittman has been fired at Arkansas. What was eventual became inevitable after a 56-13 loss to Notre Dame yesterday. A splattering, the likes of which were so ugly and so emphatic that I'm not even going to make it the Sarah McLachlan special out of respect because I love Sam Pittman and he just lost his job. So he went 32-34 over 5 years and change. He took that job when no one wanted it, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. He went 3-7 in the COVID year, and then they went 9-4, and I hoped he was off to the races. And then it was 7-6, 4-8, 7-6. He started 2-3. It sucks for him because they had 2 fourth-quarter fumbles that cost him what would otherwise have been 2 wins, and then yesterday happened, and I have no clue. I have no clue if yesterday still would have happened if you changed the other results. But anyway, Sam Pittman's out. Coaching search begins. Bobby Petrino, interim head coach. I'll get to it in a second. I know if you were around, or maybe you were at church potluck today and you didn't really have time to see the news, that even though you knew Petrino was the offensive coordinator there, it is a reality slap to the face to just hear those words. Bobby Petrino's the head coach at Arkansas again. But I'll get to that in a second. I wanted this to work so bad. All Arkansas fans did. I wanted it to work so bad for the same reason I love what Clark's doing down the road here at Vanderbilt. I love what Kenny's doing out at Arizona State. I love seeing guys who are a perfect match for their program. Shane Beamer at South Carolina feels like this to me. I don't know how to describe it. Sometimes it's because a guy went there or played there. Other times it's just because the personality and the program blend so perfectly that is very unique to college football. That doesn't happen in the pros, really. In the pros, it's more you're hired to do a job and it's a bottom line business. And there's a lot of that in college football too. It's just culture matters. NFL franchises, it's kind of you've seen one, seen them all. There's a bubble and there are 32 of them. And some of them may be in California, some of them may be in Florida. And some of them are more prestigious than the others. I'd take the Packers job over the Jaguars job. But the point is, it's pretty transferable. If something worked in Seattle, it'll work in Washington. Well, that's not always the case in college football. I would love to see Greg Schiano go coach at UCLA, just for fun, just to watch what happens. So Sam Pittman's profile probably would not have worked at many other places. But it felt like it could work at Arkansas, and I hoped it would work at Arkansas. And it looked like it was going to work at Arkansas. And the reason I loved that is because he is a great dude to be around. But also, I hoped that it would work so that more programs would chase that. because I love the unique spirit of college football, and it's really amplified when you do what Arizona State's done with Dillingham, when you do what Vanderbilt's done with Clark Lee. Difference is, those are success stories. This one ended up not being one. So, the next question becomes, well, who's going to take the job? The interim is Bobby Petrino. And I believe they put out a statement today, and they said Bobby Petrino's name will be in the running for this job, which just, again, mind-boggling. I'll finish with that. I was talking to a couple of pretty well-placed people in the coaching industry yesterday about this, because they all go to the big games. And I found myself disagreeing a little bit with some people about the stature of the Arkansas job. Like, some people look at the Arkansas job as an afterthought amongst SEC head coaching jobs, and if that's the case, don't take it, because you don't want to be the 7th or 8th or 9th best job in the most competitive and cutthroat league in America. And yeah, they'll pay enough money, but they're going to pay you so much money that they think travel to all these places. So yeah, I've experienced it up there. I go to football games up there. I go storm chasing up there. I know Northwest Arkansas. I question whether people who denigrate the potential value of this job, I question how much they know it. Now, what I'm thinking is, if you don't get the proper infusion of major industry in Northwest Arkansas, no, the Arkansas job is not one worth taking. Great people, check. Great facilities, yeah, check. But that's not going to win you football games if you can't go dollar for dollar with the big boys. Because ultimately it's about getting the players. And if you can't get the players up there, you're not going to get the wins. You're not going to out-scheme folks in this league 8 or 9 times out of the year. So the next question becomes, for anybody who gets hired there, and if you're coming after me, if I'm an in-demand head coach, the first thing I'm asking is, what guarantees is Walmart giving me? What is Tyson Chicken doing? What is J.B. Hunt doing? What is Wright's Barbecue doing? The four big industry pillars of Northwest Arkansas. But for real, I need to know what guarantees I have. Because I'm telling you, there's some coaching searches that are just now underway at Virginia Tech and UCLA. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. I think there are total and complete blinders on at a couple of places like that when it comes to what it takes to win. Okay, you've got this bygone era mentality that what it takes is, okay, we got enough money to pay the buyout so we can fire the current staff. And then we've raised enough money to pay a new staff. Problem solved. No, you just created new problems. If you can't tell me what your plan for rev share is, and then what your above and beyond plan is to fill your NIL coffers, you're dead on arrival. And I'm telling you, man, like you immerse yourself in college football fandom so you think everyone at the administrative level gets this. They don't. There's some morons who work in this profession who are making decisions who would look at you and say, what do you mean, how are we going to pay our players? We participate in rev share. Well, yeah, it's like a human saying, I breathe oxygen. What else do you want me to do? Probably a little bit more than every other human to ever exist does. Everybody breathes oxygen. Everyone participates in rev share. What kind of edge is that going to give you? You're thinking about today's university versus the university of 10 years ago. Well, today's players get rev share. 10 years ago, they didn't get it. Yeah, but we're not living in 2015. So you're competing against players on other teams that all get rev share. How are you going to give yourself an edge? And that's what I'd ask before taking the Arkansas job. How am I going to be given an edge here? Because otherwise my best is not going to be good enough. And there's a lot of ego and there's a lot of arrogance sometimes in this profession. But when it comes time to make a business decision, guys know I better be put in a position where I can get good players. And I just happen to think you can get good players at Arkansas. And I don't have a long case study for it. Because what I'm saying is I think things can be done there that haven't been done before. I actually think the landscape is pretty uniquely fashioned right now for it to be done. Just like I think Texas Tech never could have done what they did last year, a generation ago. I think Oklahoma State, and I'm still waiting to see on this, I think Oklahoma State may be on the precipice of deciding, screw it, we'll do it. Is Arkansas going to do that? Now, as for now, it's Bobby Petrino's team. I can't believe that this is the world we are living in. Bobby Petrino is once again, at least on an interim basis, the head coach of Arkansas. Now, when you are the age I am, when you're in your 30s, right, Bradley? I'm in my 30s, yeah. When you're in your 30s, or if you're in your 40s, but I'm talking like mid-30s to mid-40s, you still think that 15 years ago was yesterday. So I still vividly remember 2010, 11, 12. I always remember years in terms of what happened in football that year. But those years don't feel long ago to me at all. But to someone who's 18 years old, if I tell you, boy, remember Petrino in 2012? Remember what happened? They're like, no. Okay, so an 18-year-old is a legal adult today. So I've got a huge high school and college-aged audience that wasn't even coherent when Petrino made a ride that I would argue in SEC circles was more famous than Paul Revere's. Certainly in Arkansas circles it was. Man, I'm telling you, you need to respect the filter I have on myself because I had about 3 more lined up in my head. Jesse, remind me to tell you the jokes I had off air. But I know kids listen to this show. I respect a lot of dads driving to work tomorrow morning, want a kid-friendly environment in the truck. And so I abstained, which is more than I can say for him 15 years ago. I abstained, and I'm proud of myself for it. That's what I want to tell you. But I want to remind you or teach you for the first time, if you're not aware, just Wikipedia, just go read news articles. Go watch a special or two on it. You could not write a Netflix special about college football in Arkansas that included the storylines that actually happened in real life with Petrino there. And then he's gone. And you think he'll never set foot in this state again. And not only does he land back at Arkansas as the coordinator, he's the head coach there again. And his name's in the running for the permanent job. And you know what? I couldn't care less about his past. Someone came at me today, by the way, and said, if it was your sister, or if it was your daughter, if it was your wife, you would. What? What does that have to do with Arkansas football? What does that have to... Anyway, yeah, Bobby Petrino. I don't know what else to say. I'm paid to speak words, and I'm at a loss for words. They're watching us in Morristown, Tennessee. Boiling Springs, South Carolina. Gary, Indiana. Thank you so much. Added takeaway time. Here we go, Bradley. Several more takeaways from Saturday. Speaking of that game in Arkansas, 56-13. Notre Dame, just emphatically. This was beyond a Sarah McLachlan special, which I'm going to save for later in the show. This was just a TVMA special, a full-blown splattering. Notre Dame, 42 points and 420 yards. I'm being told those were first half numbers. Okay, 42 points and 420 yards in the first half. Paper pop. They averaged 10.2 yards per play. Translation, I had Stats and Info run these numbers. That means they averaged a first down per play. Assault. Terrible. You will notice now that Notre Dame has steadied the ship. They had 2 early losses, and now they won this game, and now they got a really workable schedule. And I've already seen some people start to talk about the Notre Dame strength of schedule thing. And the working theory was, as long as Notre Dame goes 10-2, they'll be in the playoff. Why? Because it's Notre Dame. I actually still believe that. There is an alternate growing working theory out there that they don't have another quality win because all the rest of the teams on their schedule keep losing. And so the thinking is Notre Dame's resume at the end of the year isn't going to bear the brunt of strength of schedule scrutiny. And I'm telling you, you're probably wrong, but even if you're not, well, actually, if you're not, you're not. I just think this is going to work itself out. There is unimaginable carnage ahead in college football. So what seems right now like a very finite amount of college football playoff spots could end up being we're searching for qualified teams, and Notre Dame's well within that batch. I'm just saying, I think it'll work itself out. Although your points are taken. Yeah, I did not ignore Friday night. Friday night, I was watching nothing because I was playing a doubleheader in softball. But Virginia and FSU were playing, and let me just set the scene for you. So we're out playing a doubleheader in softball. We are playing a team that, if they had point spreads on Church League Friday night softball, would be favored by about 10 against, I would say. We are down 2-0, 2-1, I think. Fourth inning, not good. And everyone's really sleepwalking because everyone's watching this game on their phone. I snuck a peek or two as well. And Florida State got down 14-0 to Virginia. And everyone's like, oh, man, oh, what's happening to them? And then it dawned on me, we were Florida State. And I yelled that in the dugout. And sure enough, we responded. 7-run inning, 4-run inning. We won, run rule. Florida State did not respond as well. Now, they did respond, and they, I think, ended up taking the lead, but Virginia ended up clipping them. And remember, we don't know how good Florida State is. You know, remember, that was the line from Bama fans after week 1 who wanted to hold out hope. Yeah, we lost to them, but we don't know how good they are. You were right. And now we got to say it about Virginia to make Florida State folks feel better. We don't know how good Virginia is. They're ranked this week, for whatever that's worth in the AP poll. They're ranked. We got Tommy Castellanos' ceiling version against Alabama. There's always baked in to a point spread out there the potential that the floor version shows up. And that's why that FSU minus 6.5 was what it was, and it didn't move all week, did it? So the jury's still out. They got Miami this week. I will be in attendance for that game. Some thought that once Florida State lost on Friday, oh, you must be rearranging your travel. No, I'm etching it in stone. I will be there for Miami, Florida State. I think they will respond. I think sneaking suspicion that'll be a competitive game. I was at a competitive game in the early portion of yesterday, and Illinois beat USC. And Illinois won despite going 2 of 4 in the red zone. This game should have been a much wider margin of victory for Illinois than it was. We've been hesitant with USC on this show. Excited, but hesitant, because we thought they may still be one more year away. And I do feel that way. But I also know you don't want to hear that about Lincoln Riley. See, this was always going to be the catch-22. I've said this since July. I said my truthful vision on Lincoln Riley is they have figured a lot of things out. They've made good moves. And I think in time, the roster is going to reflect that. It will not fully reflect it this year. That's how I felt in July. And my follow-up feel was, if they, starting now, so I'm speaking to you in July, starting now, if they're willing to give him some more patience, they'll have the product they want. But if they don't feel that he deserves more patience because he's already several years into his tenure, I would understand that. So now we're going to find out how much patience USC has for Lincoln Riley. But as for Illinois, they outrushed USC 171-26, and that's noteworthy because last week, Illinois, I'm trying to remember, I think they got outrushed like 312-2. And conversely, Southern Cal's been running the ball really good. So to outrush them in this game was no small feat. Lincoln Riley now 4-11 versus ranked teams at USC. It's just got to get better. It's just got to get better. Illinois, that loss last week, okay, maybe everyone's just got a bowling shoe ugly mulligan in their bag this year. And maybe that was Illinois' possessive version of Illinois. Next up, Tennessee and Mississippi State was very entertaining. Overtime, Tennessee 41, Mississippi State 34. This was one of our most confident bets last week. We took Mississippi State plus the points on Sunday night. Thought it would be a dogfight. Thought Mississippi State had a half-decent shot to win the game outright. And we got everything we thought we would get in this game. Tennessee's run defense stood up fairly well here. For a game where you gave up 34, and a lot of that's kind of weird because there was some defensive stuff, I thought their secondary played pretty well. Like, I just thought it was a fight. Not every game has to have these 3 or 4 bullet points worth of explainers. It was just a fight. It was a really good game, which surprised some people because they are probably still a little bit too low on Mississippi State. State's probably just a better team than you think they are. And they showed that yesterday, but since they lost, no one will really take notice. But it's just a fight. It's just a fight. So now, here's what happens, okay? You had a game you could have lost. You took a new starter at quarterback on the road, and there were some picks, but there were tipped balls. Like, I thought Aguilar played pretty well, actually. But you had a game that could have gone against you. Some would argue maybe it should have gone against you. I don't ever believe in that. but you won. So you had the Georgia loss. This would have been devastating. This would have been a second conference loss. It was just that close to happening, but it doesn't. It goes your way. All right, so that's Tennessee's schedule. They got Bobby Petrino coming to town. Get used to saying that for a little while. And then they go to Bama, third Saturday in October, which will take place the third Saturday in October. Just keep an eye on that team. Anyone who dodges that kind of conference loss, just keep an eye on it. I remember, every single year since I've been watching this sport, there's been a result or two, first half of the season, that you didn't understand the value of until the back half, until November, until the playoff selection show is on. And you're looking at the resume and you're saying, dude, you remember that game in week 4 that at the time I didn't think was that big a deal? Think about if Tennessee would have lost that game. They wouldn't even be here. Now they are. Yeah, that's why the outcomes really matter. Indiana and Iowa was so ugly. So ugly. This was an Iowa game. The best way I could describe this is Indiana won an Iowa game, which is a pretty big compliment. We don't give out Chalai rating on the added takeaway games. This one we get minus Chalai. Hideous to watch. People paid money to go to this game, and I commend you guys. The offense got bottled up. Iowa had one explosive play. And here's the question, or Indiana, rather, had one explosive play, but they won. They found a way to win and then found a way to let Iowa cover and then had the quarterback apologize to bettors in the postgame. We had Kiffin tell people to take the over last week. We had Fernando Mendoza openly understanding he took a safety to end the game that took it from a 7-point win to a 5-point win. The line was 6.5 at the beginning of the week, in case you're wondering what the impact that had. Just funny. Anyway, Indiana, same thing I just said about Tennessee. You got a conference win that easily could have been a loss, and who knows? Who knows what it means moving forward? Ohio State went up to Washington and took care of business. There are two voices that I have, one on each shoulder right now with Ohio State. And one of those voices keeps saying, we still don't really know about Ohio State. And then there's this other voice that says, are you going to do this all year? You keep trying to discredit the opponent after Ohio State beats them. You discredit Texas. Oh, we still got to find out about Ohio State. Okay, well, then they go to Washington, and you tout Damon Williams and the home field advantage there, and they shut all that down. They only had like 6 offensive possessions, which is crazy. We still got to – it's one of the slowest pace of play teams. We still got to figure Ohio State out. Hey, maybe it's just complimentary football. Maybe that's the way they're going to play this year. Or maybe they've looked and they've said, we've got a suffocating defense, and Matt Patricia has worked 2 really good offensive staffs now. We don't have to put the pedal down offensively. We can afford to take our time. We got incredible wide receiver talent, but in many cases, the only way they could have lost this game yesterday is if they tried to force things with Julian Sayans. So they can afford to bring him along slowly, and they can afford to let this offense mature. We, of course, know what they are in September. They hope not to be in November. Washington had a 4-0 explosive play edge in this game and got beat by 3 scores. I would not have believed that if you told me that Friday. So, the Big Ten, it's Ohio State and it's Oregon, and then there's a pretty wide gap, and then Penn State down there. So is it just Ohio State, Oregon on a collision course? Is that what we've got now? Could very well be. Let's continue. Got a few more things to talk about here. Whew, jam-packed show. Texas A&M beat Auburn 16-10. Give me 1.5 Chalai on this one. Not the most aesthetically pleasing game in the world. There was desperation in the air for Auburn, and this was a weird game because it was a moment that Auburn had to have, but they had to go into College Station, and A&M's off a bye, so situational dynamics, it's just totally against Auburn. Auburn needed this. And I also thought about A&M. How are they going to handle success? There was a lot of talk amongst A&M fans, the smarter at least, the more seasoned A&M fans, that, hey, it's great that we won at Notre Dame, but now we won at Notre Dame, now we're going to have a bye, and everyone is going to be able to just bask for 2 weeks. And yeah, we're coming out of a bye, and yeah, we're at home, but we got a desperate team coming in. And there was some concern. And there was valid concern frankly, A&M finds a way to lose those kind of games in the past. But let me explain the Mike Elko effect, because that's it. I'm convinced A&M of years past loses that game. Inexplicably, somehow, some way, you're left with your jaw on the ground. Maybe you're in the stadium. Maybe you're watching at home. You know that feeling? It's called battered Aggie syndrome. You've had it for a long time because you find ways to lose those games. Well, yesterday they had 13 penalties for 119 yards. They were 3 of 14 on third down. They lost the turnover battle. They had no passes over 25 yards. They missed 2 field goals, and they won a football game. And that's the Mike Elko effect, because you know there'll be days where it clicks. We just saw one in South Bend not too long ago. You know there'll be days where it's humming offensively. Can you win when you don't have your fastball? How many different ways can you win? Are you a Swiss Army knife? Or are you just kind of a one-trick pony and someone figures that out and you're screwed, you're dead in the water? Well, we know that's not A&M. We're starting to learn. They held Auburn to 10 points, 177 total yards. They ran for over 200 on what I considered to be one of the best rush defenses in the country. You're just finding more and more ways to win. So that's what's important with Texas A&M. The biggest takeaway for me, if you're asking what was important about this in some 16-10 win, well, it's a conference win. That's the first thing. The second thing is I've watched them win 2 distinctively different types of ways now. They had to go outscore Notre Dame on the road, and then they won a rock fight at home when they clearly don't have their best stuff against a very desperate Auburn team. December's a long way away. You don't have to have it all figured out in September. Hardly anyone does. You're still evolving. The best teams get better. The best staffs make sure their teams are getting better. I think A&M's getting better. How many tools do you have in the bag come December? Are you at the table in December? And if you are, how many tools do you have in the bag? Well, now I've seen Marcel Reed explosivity in the passing game. I saw him run for over 200 yesterday. I've seen him improve defensively. You figure out who you are. That's about forming identity. I'm figuring out who you are. You're figuring out who you are. There's no need to be gloomy, and I'm not the only one saying it. Mike Elko, take it away.
Does anybody want to ask a question about like us being 4-0 for the first time since 2016, or how did the defense bounce back, or how about you held them to 176 yards on offense and you had 5 sacks and they were 0 for 12 on third down and 0 for 2 on fourth down and you got the return game going again? Like, I don't mean to sound like someone else, but my gosh, will you guys stop being so dreadful and gloomy?
Well, we're only halfway through this.
Yeah. Next one.
I mean, seriously. What's the matter with you people? Billy Lucci's got to get Texas A&M in check. We can't have this. We cannot have this. I have no idea what Auburn is defensively or offensively. I have no idea who or what Auburn is offensively. I expected them to go into this game and compete. And the score was close, but I expected them to have at least a 2-to-1 run-to-pass ratio, because that was their only path to me to winning the game. And they ended up 33 passes, 24 rushes, and it really was a wider margin than that, because all of the sacks, and there were several of them, again, count as rushes. So they tried to throw the ball to win, and that's not happening. It's not happening not because you can't get guys open and because you don't have good receiver talent. You don't have the quarterback to get it to them. It's just a failed experiment. The Jackson Arnold experiment is just a failed experiment, and it's probably not going to get better, because playing Georgia and Missouri and Bama at Vanderbilt doesn't tend to make it better. And now they're a 3-2 team, and there are probably several more losses coming, and it's going to get worse on the schedule, but it's going to get worse tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, Auburn, the Sarah McLachlan special. It was a must-have game, and they were outgained 414 to 177. A&M had more rush yards than you had total yards. A&M had more pass yards than you had total yards. And A&M didn't exactly light it on fire offensively yesterday. You were just that bad. They doubled you up on first downs. Auburn was 0 of 15 on third and fourth down. Another 5 sacks. Another 6 tackles for loss. In winning time, the fourth quarter winning time, Auburn had 1 total yard. 52 yards rushing was their lowest output in several years. I unfortunately have here Auburn's drive chart. 3 and out, punt. 3 and out, field goal, 3 and out. We head into the locker room, halftime adjustments. Second half, turnover on downs, punt. Touchdown drive of 2 yards. 3 and out, turnover on downs. It's just a failed experiment. It's dead in the water. I have no clue where they're going to go from here. One thing I've learned about college football, the SEC, is you don't reinvent yourself on the fly. Once the plane's already off the ground, there are only so many repairs you can make. They're trying to rebuild the plane at 30,000 feet. And I think we know what happens to a plane when you try and rebuild it at 30,000 feet. Your Sarah McLachlan special, the Auburn Tigers. It takes a lot out of me to do that. It really does. But I will tell you this. Tailgating, you have essentials. Okay, we all know that. Flex Power, a new partner of ours. We've been having a lot of fun with them. When I walk through tailgating scenes, I've always noticed the canopies, the food, the grills, but I also noticed the generators. We badly wanted a partner that completes the tailgating experience. Flex Power does. And so, if you are familiar with setting up your tailgate scene, you probably rely on a generator anyway. We have friends of the program now that can provide you with the 3300i generator specifically over at myflexpower.com. And I'd say the same thing about Flex Power that I'd say about Quick Trip. I know you need fuel to get to the game. Just check out one of our friends. Academy Sports and Outdoors, check out one of our friends. Flex Power, friend of the program in a big way. And these are folks who watched the show long before we ever got in business with them, which is why we got in business with them. So if you need the generator, it could be for tailgating. It could just be if you're scared storms are going to knock the power out, as they often do. myflexpower.com can and will help you out, and we appreciate them. I wanted to make it through an entire show tonight. I badly wanted to make it through an entire show without talking about officiating. And I thought I was going to. On the flight home last night, I missed holding call here and there. Targeting, I always have problems with it. But I thought we were going to make it through a show without talking about officiating. And then I looked at my phone. And I had 1 person, 2 people, 10 people, 30 people saying, dude, Wake Forest just had an entire game stolen from them. And I said, don't start this, not this again. 1 blown call in an entire afternoon stole a game from you, really? And then I went and watched. And I don't know any other way to put it. ACC officials stole a game from Wake Forest yesterday. You're looking at the game here. Bradley, just loop it for a second. So here's the situation. If you're listening on pod, Wake Forest is up 23-20. Minute 51 to go. Georgia Tech has no timeouts left. They have the ball. Wake has the ball. They're up. Opponent has no timeouts left. It's 3rd down. Basically, they need a first down, game's over. Georgia Tech jumps off sides badly to the point where center does exactly what he's supposed to do, snaps the ball. Robbie Ashford at quarterback does exactly what he's supposed to do. He throws the ball up. Why wouldn't he? Consequence free, right? At worst, we're going to get 5 yards, and we're going to get a replay of 3rd down. They didn't throw the flag. So what did that do? Well, what it did was it made the down count, and it's an incomplete pass, so it stops the clock. And Wake has to punt, and guess what Georgia Tech did? Marched right down the field, kicked field goal, tied the game, go into overtime, win the game. Flat out stole a game from Wake Forest. Not many people will care. It won't create an outrage campaign because it was just Wake Forest. Here's the situation. Yet again, college football has allowed itself to be a laughingstock, and college football officiating has fundamentally changed the outcome of a game. I, as you know, am always the first one to tell you that blown calls don't decide games. However, there are instances where a game in any other case is over except for a call that makes it not be over. Like this is one of those situations. So I was going back and forth with some people about this today. I don't know what started this, but I posted that earlier today. And then some people came in my mentions and they said, oh, you're going to point that out, but not point this out? And they were showing like missed holding calls in the Penn State game. And I watched the clips, and absolutely, I think those are missed holding calls. If you think that is equal to what we're talking about here in terms of outrage, I don't agree with you. Because holding, even the egregious missed holding calls, even an egregious missed face mask, it's still a play moving at 100 miles an hour. And in the case of holding, it's a judgment call. Hopefully you're making proper judgment on it. But at least I kind of somewhat get when holding calls are missed. This is academic. To see that a guy is in the neutral zone at the snap, to see that a guy is offsides requires two things: eyesight and a flag in your pocket. I could take someone on day one who knows nothing about this sport, line them up right here. They're on the line of scrimmage. It's a beautiful thing. They put an official right there. It's called the line judge. And his job is to just look across the field. And if someone is in between him and the ball, it means they're offsides. And we're going to throw a flag until the game's on the line, in which case we don't throw a flag. So now we get in a situation where I want to remind you now, Georgia Tech happened to be in this game. Georgia Tech a couple of weeks ago beats Clemson. They stormed the field. They got fined. They owe the ACC money. Jake Dickerts, the new head coach at Wake, had he stepped to a podium yesterday and trashed this, he would have been spot on and he would have gotten fined. You know what the ACC league office had to do? They had to do nothing. They chose to release a statement where they admitted they messed up. And that's it. That's it. You know, your livelihood's based on you winning football games. Those players, they don't get a do-over. But what we're going to do is we're going to say we screwed up, something totally within our power. We screwed up. We don't owe you any money. You know, you owe us money when you screw up, or when you point out accurately that we screw up. We don't owe you a dime when we screw up and we cost you something. College football, billion-dollar industry, nickel and dime officiating mechanism. And again, no one really has to answer for it. There's no transparency. And even when they tell you someone had to answer for it, I guarantee you whoever blew that call, they may sit out a couple of weeks. They'll eventually just be on another crew, and all's well that doesn't end well. And that's what you have to deal with. That's what you got to swallow. It's college football officiating. What can we do about it? Boy, oh boy. Part of day one of my college football commissionership. Let's react to the AP poll. Then I'll give you some best bets and we'll be out of here. Well, the AP poll's out. That's about the most I can say for the AP poll. It's week 6. It's week 6. And I am convinced a vast block of the voters have not watched many of these teams. Let's just start talking about it. This thing is generated by Flex Power. Let's start talking about it. Arizona State is 25th. They're back. Okay. Virginia, Brigham Young, Illinois, Notre Dame. I don't have that big a problem with 21 through 25. So Michigan's at number 20, and then we get to a really, really muddy part of the AP poll. Missouri's at 19. Now, I'm going to tell you why Missouri's at 19. Most of the voters haven't watched them. That's it. That's it. They haven't lost a game. They've been pretty dominant. People haven't watched them because it's too much to ask for voters to watch games. Florida State is at 18. They dropped 10 spots. Yeah, feels about fair. Georgia Tech at 17. Why? Well, they got dropped. They won a game yesterday and got dropped. Although we just talked about it. It was a blown call. Maybe someone looked and said, I'm going to punish them if the ACC officials don't. That's cold. Actually, it's not the worst logic in the world, though, so I'm not even going to get mad at it. But number 16, I'm pretty mad about. Vanderbilt is number 16. I'll get back to that in just a second. Just circle Vanderbilt. Tennessee's 15. Iowa State is at 14. Iowa State is so underrated right now. Iowa State at 14, despite the fact that they've beaten Kansas State in another country. They beat Iowa. They beat Arizona. They went on the road to Jonesboro, Arkansas, for good measure, and beat Arkansas State. And sure as I say that, someone's going to say, oh, yeah, but none of those teams are good. Yeah, okay. Tell me Penn State's best win. Villanova, FIU. Hey, what's Texas's best win? In fact, if you look at the top 10 there, Penn State, inexplicably, is still ranked number 7 in the country. Texas is 9. I'm going to read you their combined wins. Stop me when you hear an impressive one. San Jose State, UTEP, Sam Houston, Florida International, Nevada, Villanova. I got undefeated Iowa State sitting out of the top 10 with 3 Power 4 wins. I got Vandy sitting there at 16th, went and blew out Virginia Tech in their building, went and blew out South Carolina in their building. They've run it up on everyone, but they're not in the top 10. I got a team with a loss sitting there at number 7 and no good wins. I got a team with a loss at 9 and no good wins. So why is that? Well, you're punished because your crime is your logo is the Vanderbilt logo. Your logo is the Missouri logo. Your logo is the Iowa State logo. For the 3rd week in a row, I'm saying this. Vanderbilt's not invited to the party. Texas is. Missouri, not invited to the party. Penn State just was. I went back and forth with some people about this Friday. Penn State was at that point sitting top 5. I have been doing rankings on Thursdays on this show. Even before Penn State lost, I had them at 10th. I think they've been overrated already. Now they lost a game. Penn State with a loss is still ranked higher in the AP poll than I had them ranked before they lost the game. Why? Because I believe in this crazy concept that once the season starts, you should throw your preseason predictions in the garbage. Throw your preseason thoughts in the garbage, especially after you've got 4 weeks of results under your belt. I don't even care what I thought about Penn State in the preseason, because now I've seen them play 4 times, or Texas, or Iowa State, or Missouri, because I've seen them play 4 times. I didn't think Vanderbilt was going to be a top 25 team, but now Vanderbilt's played multiple games, and they clearly have a better resume than several teams in the top 10, but they're not in the top 10 because you don't watch them play, and you have an AP vote. You don't watch Missouri play. You have an AP vote. And then I am also convinced there's another portion of the AP votership that gives benefit of the doubt to big brands. Of course they do. But they also think to themselves, oh, well, Vandy, you know what? If they want my vote, they can go prove it Saturday against Alabama. What did Penn State have to prove? What did Texas have to prove? That Vanderbilt has to prove. And you're also being predictive. You're also thinking, I don't expect Vanderbilt to be there in the end. Therefore, I won't put them there now. Like it would be any crime to put them there and then adjust if they do lose. You know, like any sane person would handle a merit-based ranking. I've done the JP poll for so long, power ratings, that I've looked at this from a distance and I've said, I cannot believe people get into the world of ranking teams. And this is why. You people are why. Oklahoma's at number 5. People have problems with that because Mateer's out. I say the same thing. It doesn't matter if he's out. This is not a power rating. It's not about what you think they will be without him. Wait for the games to happen. No one cares about your predictions. You guys suck at predicting. If you didn't, you would win money on this, but you don't. So no one cares about what you're predicting. Rank teams based on their current resume and then adjust accordingly. That's why Oklahoma should be 5. Maybe OU's low at 5. Ole Miss is up 9 spots, finally. So Ole Miss getting some credit. Miami 3, Oregon 2, Ohio State 1. By the way, imagine predicting that 3 through 6 there. Imagine it's July, media days. And I go on air and I say, you know, I think by October, I see Miami and Ole Miss and Oklahoma and A&M all in the top 7. I see them all ranked ahead of Penn State and Texas and Alabama and Georgia by then. They would have called me clickbait Pate so fast. And as it turns out, I would have been right about all of it. Because as we have found out, not everything people say that you disagree with is clickbait. Some of it could really just be a true, authentic difference of opinion. Some of it could even be they're right and you're wrong. Whomst amongst us would have thunk it? Yeah, Ohio State and Oregon, they are clearly the 1 and 2 favorites to win the Big Ten right now. And I'm really interested to see if that changes at all this year. Is there a wrench to be thrown into the Big Ten plans, or is it pretty academic? You can go bet that at FanDuel right now. FanDuel, the exclusive odds provider of the show. And you can go bet it. Look, if you think Penn State's about to make a run, go bet it right now. insane value. If you think Penn State's going to turn a corner, reinvent themselves, go win at Ohio State, go bet it right now. It's never a better time if you believe in Penn State. I myself do not, but if you do, you can go hit them up. You can go bet. I got to tell you, we talked about it. I'm going to the game Saturday. It's not one of my initial best bets. I'm about to hand out a couple, but if you think Miami's going to go blow Florida State out, you will be happy to learn they are minus 5.5 right now. So if you got a feeling, if you didn't pay enough of a price yesterday to learn there are no sure things in betting, go for it. You can go over there and you can bet $5 if you're a new user to get 300 in bonus bets. Use that QR code there. You can go to fanduel.com/Josh Pate. $500 or $5. Just bet 5, win something. Go find a big money line favorite and just bet them to win. $5. You get 300 in bonus bets. Here are our 2 early best bets for the week. Our Sunday picks went 2-0 last week. I got 2 games I'm on early. Vanderbilt's getting way too many points at Alabama. Vanderbilt plus 12.5, I will take as one of our best bets. And Wake Forest plus 5.5 against Virginia Tech. I think Wake could win the game outright. So give me Vandy plus 12.5. It's a very, very academically prestigious Ramen Noodle Express this week. And give me Wake Forest plus 5.5. We'll have several more this week. Man, what a show. What a show. Hour 40 minutes. But it was a big Saturday. I don't know what to tell you, man. We had a lot to say. We'll be back here Tuesday night, same time, full predictions for this upcoming week. Until then, we have to go eat dinner. For Director Bradley, for Producer Jesse, I'm Josh Pate. Take care. Have a great start to your week, and God bless.